Here we go.
Nole Nation, welcome into a special episode right here at the Renegade Report. We've been wanting to do a little bit more of these short form videos for folks that don't have an hour and a half to watch the whole show. Got my good friend Jesse Coger, Plant the Spear, right here with me. This is going to be no fat, no bunch of conversation, just the information and try to give you the best we can about FSU football. The topic of this video is offensive identity for the Florida State Seminoles, as we just got our depth chart yesterday. These things aren't 100% accurate. Mike Norvell only announces injuries if they're permanent, like, you're out for the year. That's when he announces injuries. So a lot of times you'll see you'll see a guy starting, and then all of a sudden game day, you'll hear this person's out, that person's out, this person's out, so it doesn't necessarily mean everybody on the depth chart. If you got to look on it, that's exactly what we'll see in Ireland, but we do have a pretty good idea through all the intel we've got throughout camp, seeing practices, highlights, talking to different people who've been able to be at the practices and everything else, and ultimately the depth chart. People have been extremely worried about this offense. They've been worried about wide receiver, mainly. Second is DJU. Those are the two biggest question marks. And in my opinion, is it warranted? Yes. Is it fair that some of these guys are ranking FSU's wide receiver core as number 8, number 9 within the conference? I don't think so. I think, when we talk about FSU, the team, the talent, everybody acts like if you don't sign 20, 4 and 5 stars every single year, you're not a top 10 team. You can't compete in all these different things. So it's kind of funny to me, people are scared this thing's going to go back to 2021 or 2022 with the wide receivers. But when you compare the talent, it is leaps and bounds. We've got guys like Hakeem Williams, Jalen Brown, who made the start out there at the Z wide receiver position. These guys are both top 100 players, sophomores, rising stars. We just don't have that Jersey guy. We don't have the known and quantitated production. But make no mistake, I have no doubt Mike Norvell is going to get these guys in a position to make plays. And we'll get back into the wide receivers a little bit. But again, the title of this episode is Offensive Identity. I was lucky enough to have Jeff Colhane on the show last night. Guys, go check that out if you're into the long form stuff. We had a great conversation with him. The identity of this team is all about the trenches. We'll get into defense later, but per this episode, the offensive trenches. These guys average a hair under 6'5", 320 pounds across the board. And I think you've got 7 seniors or redshirt seniors in that group of about 10 linemen that you can really, really count on. Basically upgrades across the board. Darius Washington is rated like the number 3 offensive tackle in the entire nation coming into the year, and he didn't settle into that position until Robert Scott got hurt last year. We bring Maurice Smith back for the 4th year starting at center. We brought all comers at him. Nobody's been able to beat him out. Casey Roddick, all the different guys. He's been steady Eddie there, but he's been forced to stay out there. We hadn't had the depth. This year we have Andre Otto. We have Jacob Rizzi. We've got legitimate guys that can spell him in a game against Rhode Island State, or if he needs to come out for a 4th quarter of a game when you're already up on somebody. Extreme depth. Last year, when you talk about the identity of this line and mauling teams, Keandre Jones was probably the only one on this offensive line at guard that would really in the run game just maul somebody. And he had some issues in pass protection. Well, you turn the page, you bring in TJ Ferguson, you bring over Richie Incognito. That might be a good comparison one day now. But you bring Richie Leonard from UF, who isn't quite of a masher like Ferguson and Keandre Jones, but he is a wide man and he can get it done. He can hold his own. And when it comes to pulling and just being where he's supposed to be, there's a reason he played, 800 snaps for UF last year. And we'll get into the running backs next. But before we get into that, I'll let you have first knock at them. But any thoughts on the offensive line, seeing the depth chart, and kind of this identity? Are we going to be able to roll over people like I think so? I mean, it's a decade since we had a line like this, in my opinion.
Yeah, man, I really hope so. And, Mike Norvell has said this offseason that he thinks this is his best and deepest offensive line during his time at FSU. We saw how good they ran the ball in 2022 when you had like Dylan Gibbons at guard. And then last year, I can't say that the offensive line wasn't good. They just it took a step back from where we expected them to be, despite all the experience. But you look at this year, they come into the season with I think it's like 190 starts, third in the country. I was looking at some snap counts earlier, and 4 out of the 5 guys on this offensive line have over 2,000 snaps of experience. The only one that doesn't is Richie Leonard, and he has 1,250. So these guys have played some college football. I think the biggest difference with this year is a couple things. One, you're going to have guys that are going to be able to not have to play through injury. They're going to be able to play at their respective positions more often. Darius Washington was like starting tackle / backup guard / backup center. Like, he's not listed as that anymore. So he's going to be able to play in his position all year. So you should get that continuity there. And then also, when you look at the guards here, they're more athletic, which I like. I think it's a better pulling group to be able to run the things that they want to run more often. Keandre Jones was a guy that I kept saying, like, watch out, man. I think he can start with the identity of this team being a run-first offense. I think you want that road grader in there. So, I mean, we got size. You mentioned it, 320 pounds. I was doing something earlier because someone actually commented on one of our posts about I think we're undersized. And we're not the tallest offensive line, but like I went back and looked last year, and Georgia starting 5 averaged 317 pounds. This year we're at 321. So we have size. And when you look at the body types, man, I'm really excited about what this offensive line can do. I think you're going to see us get back to that 2022 style offense where it's not so much boom or bust. It's more scheming and keeping the chains moving. And remember, that was the year where we run for over 200 yards in 8 games. So I'm thinking this offensive line is going to get it done, and they have a lot of depth to do it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think you've hit the nail on the head. We've talked a lot about the similarities between this team and the 2022 team. There's a lot of similarities in the amount of kind of skill talent out wide and things like that being proven. But as far as the offensive line, I agree with you. I think it'll be a lot more of that type of team. But this team is going to be able to get that 1 yard on 3rd and 1, on
Yeah.
4th and 1, 3rd and 2, 4th and 2, things like that. Be able to take it to another level. I don't think people really understand just how much better it's gone. Like, all those guys from 22, they're still here. They're way better, and we've brought guys from different places. Guys like Richie Leonard, guys like Jeremiah Byers. One surprise there I'll mention before we move on from offensive line, Robert Scott, who has been our left tackle 1 since the day he got here as a true freshman. As he got injured last year, we were kind of iffy on where he was at, whether he's 80, 90, 100%. Heard that he made some great reps in camps, would put himself in great position, just maybe wasn't quite finishing, quite trusting that leg yet. Well, he's listed as an or with Jeremiah Byers. So to have your left tackle get back healthy and be able to compete and push your right tackle, you've got the center coming back. We got 4 guards that they could interchange. Really, they put 3 as starters. Yeah, it's going to be a wave of blocking, downhill blocking, all the different counter schemes, counter G, all those things can be a lot of fun. Not to mention DJU has an ability to run the ball in more of a impact, more of a Cam Newton-esque style than Jordan Travis's Lamar Jackson style, if you will. Knock on wood, he's been pretty damn sturdy through his career. He brings that 3-to-1 touchdown ratio. But before we get into DJU and the passers, I'll let you start this one off. How are you feeling about the running backs? And tell the people just how good they are. I don't think people realize where this group ranks. You lose Trey Benson, and it's hard to kind of separate, wanting to say how good he is. And, if you talk about the things he wasn't great at, it sounds like you're talking crap about him. That's not what we're doing.
Yeah, right.
It's just the ceiling of this group is something different.
Yeah, I don't think when you compare players, it has to mean that somebody was bad for someone to be good. And, just real quick on that offensive line, like when you're bringing in guys from Alabama that aren't starting, when you got a guy like Julian Armella, and I think he's banged up, that's why he's not on the depth chart. How many years ago would he have started as a true freshman for us? And now it's year 3 and he's still not cracking the 2 deep. So, like, that speaks to the talent level they got up front. And it really, I think, with the running backs, yes, you lose Trey Benson, who was definitely a home run hitter for you, right? But I think what's interesting about this running back room that we talked about in a running back preview was you don't have that guy, right? That quote unquote guy, like a Dalvin Cook, a Cam Akers, a guy that's been the lead back wherever they've been at. But you also don't have anyone that you don't feel really good about, that you don't see having a breakout season. I mean, Roydell Williams obviously comes over from Alabama, put up 560 yards in the SEC as the number 2 back at Bama. I mean, that's, he started the SEC championship for them. put up 65 yards and a touchdown against Georgia. That's pretty good there. He 8 against South Florida, 129 yards. That was a top 50 run defense. I know it's South Florida. But then Toafili. I mean, this is a guy that's played over 1,000 snaps at Florida State. I think he's always been that flashback that has kind of been a little inconsistent, but it's his year to step into that role. And I think he's ready for that. But I also think like the depth and the diversity of skill sets in this room is what gets me excited. When you start talking about Jalen Lucas, Cam Davis, Mekhi Danzy, even. I mean, you got so many guys. Like, I think the biggest problem with this running back room is how are you going to feed them all? That's a problem I'm glad I don't have, because I think there are so many talented backs in this room that have such a diverse set of skill sets that I think we're going to see 2-back sets come back. I think we're going to be running the ball a lot. And I think you got a really good group of backs you have power backs, you have scat backs, you have receiving backs, all these guys that can get the job done, man. This is probably the room I'm the most excited about.
Yeah, no doubt. David Hale had us as the number one running back room in the ACC, and I agree with him. Yeah, we don't have that Dalvin Cook dude who's coming off a 1,000-yard season, but you mentioned it. What Roydell's done, what Toafili's done, starting at that tailback position the last couple of years. Roydell has an interesting mix of kind of what Trayshawn Ward is so great at and his time at Florida State, and what Trey Benson was so great at.
Yep.
He's got an ability to be patient, really read blocks, but he can also kick it into that top gear. Maybe not quite as fast as Trey Benson, but he's finishing those runs that Trayshawn Ward is getting caught on. And he also has something that I haven't seen out of any Florida State back since Cam Akers. There's this thing with these running backs with balance where you can grab one ankle and hold it, and they just keep running with one leg. And then when they get it free, they keep going. It's the damnedest thing. I've tried to explain it a million different ways, but it's like they can just phase through tangled up legs and stuff. He does these little skips to get through the A gap and the B gap. And I think Roydell Williams, he is going to explode. I wouldn't doubt it if he had 1,000 yards, even with how spread out these carries are. But yeah, if he doesn't, that's why it's not a lack of talent, and it goes deep. You hear about Sam Singleton, who's in the tailback side of things, more of a Lawrence Toafili type of guy, but he's just knocking dudes out at practice, running guys over on the goal line, breaking tackles. He had Adam Fuller ready to just like bite somebody's head off one day because he made the defense look so bad. Running back's going to be a lot of fun.
He's probably the most underrated guy in the room, I think. And if that's a consensus 4-star coming in with a year of practice under his belt and a little bit of game experience, if that's your most underrated guy, man, we're in a good position.
Facts. And we haven't even got to Cam Davis. Cam Davis shows up on campus looking like a third-year NFL player. A lot of folks that you talk to will say he's like the most athletic, probably the most gifted guy on the team already. He's made the depth chart. In that running back position behind Keziah Holmes as the third running back. Definitely we'll see some out of him, and wouldn't be surprised to see him get 200 or 300 carries towards the end of the year by the time it's all said and done with, because he's a freak. The clips you've seen are amazing. We're already 13 minutes into this thing. I promised it would be short, so we're going to get to wide receivers. We may go a little bit over our target of 15 minutes, but the wide receiver core, we've set it up with this identity of this offense. It's going to be about running the football. It's going to be about throwing the ball to all 6 of those backs we've got, because all 6 of them can catch. DJ, you can make that 40-yard throw from the right half to the sideline like it's nothing and put it right on the money. What he can also do, his best route, there may be 1 or 2 above it, but his go route, slot fades, things of that nature, he's a beast. He can throw that thing up. He can connect on the long ball. He has just a cannon of an arm. He could probably sling it 69, 70 yards. So Jaylen Brown comes in, gets that starting spot. On the other side, we have Malik Benson, both kind of similar, both closer to what we had with Ontario Wilson in 2022. When you look at the wide receiver core overall, and even a guy like Micah Hyde-Danzy, we've got like 6-7 guys on this offense and in the wide receiver core that runs sub 11 second 100 meters, like 11.8 or 10.8, all the way down to like one guy runs a 10.4. So you're talking about some freaky speed. We just don't have that Jersey guy. We don't have the guy that has, showed the ability to catch. But again, going back to 2022, how many catches did Johnny Wilson have? And that year in 2022, it was between Darion Williamson and Kentron Portier. They're still here. They're still making plays. I've heard good things about Kentron. But around them is 6 or 7 guys that all would have started that year. They all would have, blown past Parchment and all those guys in 21 and 22. And so, yeah, I'm super, super excited about the wide receivers. You've heard about LaWayne McCoy. You've heard about Elijah Moore. They both made the 2D. Super excited about them. Who's your Malik Benson, guys? He's the number one. He's kind of set aside. So for the kind of like last kind of question of the show, I'll ask you, who's your top guy? Who do you think's the wide receiver that'll break out and really make some waves and get some stuff going with DJU?
I mean, obviously, I'm really excited about Malik Benson. I mean, this is a guy, again, come in from Alabama. Didn't get a lot of targets there, but it was his first year out of JUCO, so you had a little adjustment period there. They also had two really good receivers at Alabama, and running back playing quarterback there. So I don't wholeheartedly put that on him. And if you look back, I know it's JUCO, but he was extremely productive in JUCO. Averaged 111 yards per game his first year. I mean, that's ridiculous. So I think if you can get back towards that level of production, I think he's a 10-6, 100 guy. I think you're going to have the speed to take the top off of defense. You mentioned Pokey Wilson. You think back to that Miami game in 22, like the kill shot 2 minutes into the game where he just ran right past the secondary and we scored a touchdown. I think that's what you're going to see a lot of this year. You're going to see guys that have the speed to get in space. And I think that's why you saw Jaylen Brown there as the starter as well. I also like Ja'Kai Douglas in the slot. We know that's a speedy
Mm-hmm.
guy. We had size last year, but Keon was a functional speed guy, but you didn't have a lot of speed at receiver. It was a throw it up and go get it offense. And so this year, I think you're going to see more scheming to get guys in space. And I think that's going to take advantage of DJU's arm. I think you're going to see them be able to take the top off of defenses. I do think with the Jaylen Brown thing, it is a little bit interesting that he beat out all those other guys, which may be a little bit disappointing there. But I think between that Portier, that Darion Williamson, I think Hakeem Williams, and as well as Deuce Spann, I think those are
Mm-hmm.
four guys that all of them have incredible size. All of them have some experience. All of them have a good skill set. So if you can just find like one or two of that group to step up into that big receiver role, I think it gives you size too. But man, I really think that the speed at wide receiver is going to be just deadly this year when you look at combining that with DJU's arm. And I will say, the last thing I will say is Mike Norvell's offense, when it's at its best, and I looked this up the other day, they create a lot of explosive plays, usually over 90 a year. And that's something that we fell down to around 76, I think, last year. So with the speed at wide receiver, I think you're going to see the return of the explosive play.
Yeah, I could not agree. I could not agree anymore. Last year we had Keon and Johnny, and you mentioned it. They just didn't have the top end. Those were 4.5, 4.6 guys, which is enough to get you in the NFL. Like it's enough to be a receiver, but it's not. It's not that 10.5, 10.4, 100-meter time. We have those guys this year, and that was just what it was. That was the function of it last year. That's who our best two wide receivers were. So that's what the offense revolved around. This year we've got the speedsters that we're going to want to get out there running those go routes and slot fades and slants and all that. Excuse me, posts is what I meant to say. So that's what the offense will revolve around. It's going to be play action. It's going to be smash mouth football, getting guys matched up on linebackers, getting the slot guy matched up on safeties, and getting guys wide open, beat deep. I will touch on Kyle Morlock real quick. He's really grown up in this camp and gotten a lot better. He's kind of that far and away number one tight end. I think people are a little disappointed that Landon Thomas and Amari Williams weren't a bit higher up on the depth chart. But I'll end the show how I started it, guys. The depth chart's great. We love it, but it doesn't necessarily mean this isn't a power rating of the roster. It's the kind of idea of who's been most consistent in practice up to this point and who's most deserving of these different spots. There's no telling what happens when the game starts. 2 snaps in, somebody may get pulled and replaced. We've seen it before where the guy that started the series and that was it. The next guy came in. So I wouldn't doubt that. Talking about the offensive line earlier, he mentioned there's no doubles. There's no backups at multiple positions. There's nobody starting that's a backup from somebody. That's the first time on the depth chart since Mike Norvell's been here. So it just hammers how far the talent has come. And yet we're going to find it. Guys, we don't have the name. I can't tell you the specific wide receiver it's going to be, but I can tell you there's far and away more talent in that room than there has ever been, since Mike Norvell's been here. You had a couple guys who stood out at the top last year, but as far as depth, ability, athleticism, all that, Florida State's going to be great. They're going to run the football. They're going to hit the play action, hit their deep plays, and it's going to be a very, very exciting year for Florida State football. Any final comments before we get out of here?
I would just say, echo your point about the depth chart. I mean, you have to remember that they rotate a lot, and we saw that with the defense last year. I think early on, you're going to see them lean a little bit experience. That's why you see like Devontae Brown over Hussey and Noles over Little Jr. I think they just want that experience early in the season. because you got some tough, some pretty solid teams early on. But as they settle in on these positions, you're going to see a lot of rotation. You're going to see a lot of guys get time that may not even be on the depth chart right now. But again, I think it just speaks to the depth that they have now and the depth of talent, how much this floor has been raised. And things may not look like they did last year, but I think given where we're at, higher blue chip ratio, better depth, Florida State's in for a good season.
Boom. You said it. I'm going to go ahead and make a prediction right here. Minimum 3,000 yards from DJU and 30 touchdowns. And I'll call that total. It doesn't have to be passing, but Mike Norvell gets 3,000 yards, 30 touchdowns out of his quarterbacks. I think you get that out of DJU this year. I think you run the ball for a couple thousand yards and everybody is happy. We're going to do our full season production tomorrow. We've got Jake Crane from Crane and Company coming on. We're doing it's called First Jake, kind of like a first take episode. We're going to throw down with him and argue on quite a few different points that we disagree on. We'll talk about some stuff we agree on as well and have fun with it. Make sure you go follow Plant the Spear 1 on X. Make sure you go to plantthespear.com. Get everything he has to offer over there. Make sure you're following my guy Jesse here on YouTube at Plant the Spear. Make sure you're following this channel. Hit the like, hit the sub. Be looking for Jesse's shorter video that he's going to be coming out with. And we appreciate you guys. Go Noles, baby.
Go Noles.